hello, one and all. Welcome to another episode of MMA Visionalysis. This one, I'm here to talk about Dricus, middleweight champion, and his recent comments and thoughts on the idea of Islam Makhachev, current lightweight champion, moving up to 185. I'm going to get into that and so much more. But before you get started, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that notification to get all of this that is new from this channel, your channel, the one and only MMA Visionalysis. So many different ways I want to approach this video. I think the best way to approach this video is to start off by saying this. AKA Coach Javier Mendez, joined by the likes of Khabib Nurmagomedov now, which I consider a trainer and a huge influence in that gym, is one of the best gyms around. The most calculated, precise, up to point. I don't view them as, or any fighter that comes out of that gym, I don't view those guys as the kind of fighters or trainers, or maybe sometimes the managers. Ali Abdelaziz is a bit controversial to some at times. Excluding Ali Abdelaziz, which could be controversial at times, that is the manager of most of these guys, AKA is very measured, precise, stoic in their ways. What do I mean precisely? Okay, what I'm trying to say here is that we are talking about a gym that's produced prime fighters in the modern day UFC. In the last decade, AKA has produced not only champions, but double champs, the likes of Daniel Cormier, and present champions, not quite double champions, but has potential of becoming double champions, guys like Islam Makhachev. Obviously, there were speculations of Islam moving up to weight prior to Bilal winning that welterweight title. We kind of said it immediately after the fight. As long as Bilal Muhammad is the champion of the welterweight division, you can forget about Islam Makhachev moving up to that particular division. These two will not fight each other. Said it immediately after the fight. That was confirmed by Islam Makhachev a few days later. Islam claims that he's no longer interested in moving up to that welterweight division because obviously he's not fighting his friend. And I think at this point, teammate. Obviously, Bilal Muhammad's style was clearly impacted by training with the Dagestanis, or AKA, let's say. I don't know how to say it. I know he had at least 1 week to train with Khabib Nurmagomedov himself. And just having Khabib and that influence on your side means that it's pretty much the Dagestanis, AKA, and Coach Javier Mendez. Ultimately, there was definitely the wrestling aspect of Bilal Muhammad's game was definitely from training with those guys. Now, I do digress a bit. I'm going back to my original subject. We are talking about a gym that's produced the who's who in the UFC. From the Luke Rockholds, Daniel Cormier's, arguably the GOAT, Khabib Nurmagomedov, the guy that's actually retired undefeated, something that's not going to be matched for a very long time. You guys have to understand that. I do understand there are potential fighters who may have an undefeated record, but I doubt that it's going to happen in dominant fashion. Maybe his cousin Umar Nurmagomedov can repeat, but it's kind of too early to say that about Umar. I don't want to get ahead of myself in terms of Umar Nurmagomedov, but I definitely think he has championship potential in that bantamweight division. And perhaps later on in that featherweight division. I do digress a bit once again. Now, going back to my point, AKA's produced some of the finest fighters the UFC's in the world's ever seen, at least in the recent decade. This decade. Best fighters ever. I look at that camp as one of the most precise and calculated camps. They don't make statements that are just statements just to be made to provoke responses. Or I don't view Coach Javier Mendez as the coach that is trying to provoke a response or is controversial in any sort of way. So if Coach Javier Mendez says something, if a person out of AKA says something, excluding Ali Abdulaziz, with all respect to Ali Abdulaziz, that's the manager of most of these guys, but sometimes he plays into being a controversial, let's say a person who makes controversial statements. Aside from Ali Abdulaziz, I'm talking about the gym itself, coached by Javier Mendez. Very rarely that they make statements that they're not willing to back up with actions. And I did make a video a few weeks back talking about, actually I think a week or two back, talking about Coach Javier Mendez's thoughts on Islam Makhachev moving up to the middleweight division now. Obviously, in recent comments that Dricus, middleweight champions, had to make, he thinks that those comments are borderline laughable. The fact that Islam Makhachev wants to move up to that middleweight division. And in all honesty, at first glance, I can see why Dricus thinks that it's laughable, But there's two modes of thinking. There's a fast way of thinking, which is instinctive. Most of the time, it's wrong. And there's a second mode of thinking. That's the slow kind of thinking, which is when you think of an idea, just kind of take the time to actually think about the idea thoroughly. And the idea here is Islam moving up to that middleweight division. Like I said, at first glance, I would probably laugh alongside Dricus and just kind of think that it's silly. This small guy coming from 155 coming to challenge the bigger guy. It's laughable. I do understand. That's the fast way of thinking. Instinctive. We didn't really think about those statements much, so therefore we're going to come up with that kind of response. Now, there is the slow way of thinking, which includes actually dissecting the statement. 185, Islam Makhachev. Okay, so we have to actually think about what's being said here. Let's look at the 185 division. Okay, I'm going to simplify it. Do we see anybody that's the same height, at least, as Islam Makhachev? Immediate answer is going to be yes. Matter of fact, Islam is taller in terms of height than some fighters that actually fight in the middleweight division. Who, you may ask? Simple. Kevin Gastelum. Torso-wise, yes, he's a little bigger than Islam Makhachev, but Islam's definitely taller than him. That being said, what I'm trying to say here is that Islam Makhachev stands, let's say, of 5'10", 5'11". I'm pretty sure the guy walks around at probably 190 pounds, maybe 195 at times. Maybe, let's say, between 185 and 195, the guy probably walks around when he's not training camp. So it's not like out of the realm of possibility for him to, pack on the muscle or just really not have to lose any water weight in order for him to qualify for that 185 division. So height-wise, he's covered. Weight-wise, definitely covered. I'm pretty sure he at least walks around 185. I'm pretty certain of that. Those guys are pretty big. During when there's no fight going on, they actually pack on the weight. So I think he can pack on the weight, and it would mean that he doesn't have to drain himself to make that 155 division, which I don't want to say he's big for that division. That's certainly not the case, but I do understand what's being said is a bit dramatic, jumping not one but two divisions. It is a bit wild, but it has been done before. I mean, matter of fact, Islam Makhachev's former teammate has done it before. DC fought in 3 different weight classes. Manny Pacquiao fought like in 6 or 7 different weight classes. But let's not go too far. DC fought at 185, 205, and heavyweight. Right? So it certainly can be done. And DC was relatively a smaller guy, not only for the heavyweight, but he was also a smaller guy for light heavyweight, and might I add, he was also a smaller guy for middleweight. I mean, I understand that if you look at middleweight, some of those guys 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". DC is probably 5'11", 5'10", 5'11", right? Just bigger torso, strong guy, and that's the thing with AKA. Like, I do understand that for Dricus, it might sound like it's an amusing, laughable idea, but in reality, it is a very real idea. It's very, very close, probably, to reality. And in all honesty, this might happen. This might happen after Arman Tsarukyan. This might happen. Just because you look at that lightweight division, you have Poirier just been defeated by Islam. Charles Oliveira just lost to Tsarukyan. Tsarukyan's up next, okay? We have Chandler, who's probably not going to get a fight against a champion. Might get a fight. That's the only ready fighter, really, in that top 5. And then we have Gage, who just got knocked out by Max Holloway. So, in reality, you can say Islam is lined up against Arman Tsarukyan, who's serving a ban, so they're not quite lined up. There's no specific date for that, but that's the most obvious opponent for Islam in that lightweight division. And then you have a possibility of another fight, maybe Chandler, but really Islam has nobody else to fight in that lightweight division, if you think about it hard enough. We know that he's not moving up to that welterweight division because Bilal Muhammad is the holder of that title, so that's not going to happen as long as Bilal is the holder. There only leaves him with the possibility of moving to 185, which is not such a crazy idea if you actually think about it. And in all honesty, I'm pretty sure that Islam trains with the middleweights, light heavyweights, and heavyweights, and I'm pretty sure that he can take those guys down too. I'm pretty sure it's going to work the same way. It's going to work the same way. If the guy latches onto you, if he takes you down, if he gets a single leg, it is over. I don't care who you are. Gets that body triangle, get a hold of, and that's it. Rear naked choke. It doesn't matter. You can be Dricus as well. And Dricus has to be careful with the comments that he's making as well, with all respect to, middleweight champion here. But we start hearing a lot more from guys after they become champion. Obviously, everybody wants to be heard. At the same time, I think fighters have to practice, caution, especially when they're talking about a guy that could possibly be your upcoming opponent. So you don't want your words to come back and kind of bite you. At the same time, I believe Dricus has a real task in the form of Israel Adesanya that he has to focus on at this time. And I don't think Dricus, I'm pretty sure he was asked about this kind of thing, and that's why he thinks it's, or where he said what he said. But it's not so laughable if I were Dricus. As a matter of fact, in all honesty, those kind of statements, you will provoke a response from a guy like Islam Makhachev. You guys all remember what happened when Conor McGregor provoked a response from Khabib Nurmagomedov. These guys, they will not forget these kind of comments. And I'm telling you that for Dricus, these kind of words can come back to haunt him in the future. It may sound like it's a laughable concept for some people at first glance, but if you think about it hard enough, it's not such a laughable one. If you made it this far, I appreciate you for sticking around. Please let me know what you think in the comments. Like, subscribe for more.